Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be looking at monopoly and how to evaluate the monopoly market structure, looking at the overall model in terms of the points for and the points against a monopoly and how you'd use that in an essay type question. Hey guys, we're going to be running through the monopoly video today, so we're going to keep it fairly straightforward and fairly simple. As you can see behind me, what we'll start with, as always, is the definition for monopoly. It's a market structure where there's one dominant firm, and that dominant firm has the ability to set the price. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll start with the assumptions, and the first assumption is that there is one dominant firm or there's a single seller. That's fairly obvious, that in a monopoly what we're dealing with is one firm, and that one firm has control of the market, and that its demand curve basically is the industry, and therefore it can control the price. The second assumption here is that there's some degree of product differentiation. Now that's quite important, because the more a monopoly is able to differentiate its products, the more degree of price control it will have over the market. If it has a very weak degree of product differentiation, then it will have less ability to set the price. The third assumption, and one that's obviously there, which I've highlighted in red, is price maker, one of the most important ones, the one that you would have to mention in your definition. If you recall, the definition is it's a market structure where there is one dominant firm, but also where firms are price makers. They have the ability to set the price, and that's what makes it truly unique. In monopolies, that assumption is really important because firms have a downward sloping average revenue curve, which is a demand curve, and that tells firms that they are able to basically set the price according to what their profit maximization goal is. High barriers to entry. So this pretty much makes it impossible, or near enough impossible, for other firms to enter the market, because there are high barriers to entry, which may be as simple as a very high fixed costs. It could be patents, which is an artificial barrier to entry, so a protection which doesn't allow other people to copy a type of innovative good that a monopoly has made, and other forms of barriers to entry, including market fees, exit fees, and any other barrier to entry you can think of. So there are very high barriers to entry, and that restricts other firms from coming into the market and competing with the dominant firm that's already there. 5 is imperfect information. This is not one that's that important in terms of the assumption. Imperfect information just essentially means that information is restricted. So the monopoly has access to all the information, or most information, especially when it comes to prices, and that information isn't shared. So it makes it harder for competitors to find out what the price is, and it makes it harder for consumers to also find out what the price is. Again, that's an assumption, because in reality, it's a bit different, as we know. There's no substitutes for the good. So you cannot find substitutes in alternative places of the good the monopoly is selling, and that's why, again, they have price setting power, is because consumers can't find substitutes or alternatives. And finally, same with perfect competition, is that the firms in monopolies are profit maximizers. They look to accumulate and make as much abnormal profit as possible. So now we'll focus on the diagram now, and as you can see, the diagram here, okay, is a diagram of monopoly, which dominates the market. You can see immediately that there is a downward sloping marginal revenue curve, and there's a downward sloping average revenue curve. Okay, the relationship between those two is that the average revenue, the marginal revenue, falls twice as much as the average revenue. Okay, so essentially the average revenue is there, and you can see the steepness of it. The marginal revenue is twice as steep. So profit maximization, again, is where MC is equal to MR. Now, where the marginal cost and marginal revenue cross, that's where you have MC equals MR, which is at that point there. Bring that down, and that gives you your level of output. At this point, what you need to do is take that level of output up to the demand curve, which is the average revenue curve. So you just take that up, and what that will give you is the price that the monopoly can charge the consumer. Profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost. So we can't forget about the total cost. How do we accumulate or work out the total cost? Well, it's as simple as going back to your point of MC equals MR, taking it up to the cost curve, which is just there, okay, bringing that across, and then labeling it C1. And what you'll see now is the area of abnormal profit, which is highlighted just here, and you can identify that as abnormal or supernormal profit. So that section there highlights the amount of profit the monopoly is making and it's a very high level of profit. And as we know, the monopoly is a profit maximizer, and therefore it's something that it is looking to do as a business objective. Again, just to recap with the monopoly itself, because there's one dominant firm, essentially the average revenue curve is the demand curve, but that also represents the industry, because there's nobody else competing in this industry apart from this one dominant firm. That's what gives the ability to this monopoly to set the price. Okay, there's no competition, and we know why, because of the assumptions we said before. The second bit to understand is that both the demand curves, the average revenue and margin revenue, and the cost curves can change. Well, if the monopoly has higher cost, then you just need to shift the marginal cost curve and the average cost curve up, and you carry out the same process as before. If you need to show a shift in demand, well, these two curves here, you shift them to the right or to the left, depending on whether demand increases to the right or if demand decreases to the left. It's a good idea to work out the efficiencies, and as you know from previous videos, we have to work out the allocative, productive and dynamic efficiencies. But allocative efficiency is just basically where supply meets demand, okay, where welfare is maximised both for producers and consumers. It's at the point where price equals marginal cost. Now all you need to do is look at your diagram here. Remember, we're not referring to MC equals MR. That's our profit maximization point. What we need to refer to is our point of production. So if we take that up to the price, which is what we have at P1 up here, is that point there equal to the marginal cost? Well, clearly you can see it's not on the marginal cost curve. The marginal cost curve is over here. So it's not allocative efficient, okay? Is it productively efficient? So at the price and output point, is it producing on the lowest point of its average cost curve? So if you take a look now, there's the point at which it's producing that in terms of price and output. That's nowhere near its lowest point of its average cost curve. So therefore, it's not productively efficient. Is it dynamically efficient? The condition for dynamic efficiency is if it can make supernormal profits. In this case it is. The key bit is to understand that they don't necessarily have to be dynamically efficient, but because they've met the condition of having supernormal profits, we can say yes, they are dynamically efficient, or a better answer might be that they can be dynamically efficient and they can reinvest those in innovation and research and development, which will in turn help them make more profit in the long run to basically reduce the long run average cost curve of production. X efficiency is quite simple. It's whether they're producing or not producing on a cost curve. Here's where we're producing. We're nowhere near or on the cost curve. So again, it's not very efficient. Finally, we need to now evaluate this monopoly model. It's really important that you finish off by evaluating the points for and against. So let's start with the points for a monopoly. So the first point for a monopoly is that it's dynamically efficient, okay? And when a monopoly is dynamically efficient, it reinvests its profits into innovation and research and development. This will in turn allow it to reduce its long run average cost curve, and therefore consumers should benefit in the form of lower prices. And that's why that being dynamically efficient can be an advantage. The second advantage of a monopoly is that the economies of scale, okay, important point. The bigger the firm is, the more chance it has of having economies of scale. Economies of scale means that the firm is able to produce more output at a lower cost. The reason it's an advantage is because if those lower costs are passed on to the consumer in the form of lower prices, then the consumers benefit and it's an advantage overall. Okay, the third point, natural monopolies and regulation. Natural monopolies means that essential services are being provided to consumers at a lower price, a price at which allocative efficiency is being achieved. It's just good to understand that it's an advantage because natural monopolies provide essential services, and those essential services are being given to consumers at lower prices. Okay, the next then advantage of a monopoly is that monopoly markets are heavily regulated. So if a monopoly misbehaves and it catches the eye of the Competition Commission and the government can then regulate the market, the monopoly markets, and it stops them from doing that same action again in the future. So the more the market's regulated, the less chance there is that consumers are going to be exploited on a regular basis. The final advantage of a monopoly is that a domestic monopoly can have intense global competition from other monopolies, which can lead to, again, lower prices. So the points against to make for a monopoly is that when we said it could be dynamically efficient, well, in this case, the point against it, it might not be dynamically efficient. So a firm may choose not to invest the supernormal profits it makes into innovation and research to reduce long-run average cost of production and pass these cost savings on to consumers, it might instead pay the profits in the form of dividends. Another point against is that it's not allocatively efficient. The third disadvantage is that it's not productively efficient. The fourth point is that diseconomies of scale may lead to higher prices. When a firm becomes too big, as it increases output, costs start to rise. They will then pass these cost increases on to the consumers in the form of higher prices. The fifth reason why monopolies are harmful, why it's not good, is because essentially they exploit consumers. They can exploit consumers due to the fact that they charge very high prices, okay, and they actually have low output. It's important that you remember that monopoly can't do both at the same time. They can't charge a higher price and lower the output. They can only do one or the other. And this may affect people who are on very low incomes and can't afford the good but need it. And the next point is that it can reduce the consumer surplus and economic welfare. The monopoly realizes that there are some people who are willing to pay over and beyond the market price, or the price that's reasonable, and therefore then they are price discriminating in order to collect some of that consumer surplus and turn it into monopoly profits. The next disadvantage of monopoly is that it can lead to lower quality. The monopoly is not too concerned about increasing quality as they're already dominating the market and there's no competitors to worry about. The last disadvantage of a monopoly is that it can price discriminate. It can use price discrimination to extract more monopoly profits out of those consumers who are willing to pay slightly more. The key part of the essay are your issues, your chains of analysis, and how you evaluate those issues. For a 20 mark question, you need to be able to speak about at least 4 issues and be able to express them well in terms of chains of analysis and also in terms of evaluating each one. If you like the information you received today, please leave some comments at the bottom. If you need any more videos, put the topics down. I do have lots of videos coming up, but please subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, please do ask. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you gained something from it. Again, this is Mohsin from Progress Us, and until next time, keep revising economics.